Americans. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. Our 2 weeks of 2-hour specials daily, Breaking with Convention, War, Peace, and the Presidency. I'm Amy Goodman. We're broadcasting this week from the Democratic National Convention here in Philadelphia. To talk more about the convention, Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, and President Obama's legacy, we're joined by 2 guests. Glaude is chair of the Department of African American Studies at Princeton University. His most recent book is Democracy in Black: How Race Still Enslaves the American Soul. He recently wrote an article for Time magazine headlined, "My Democratic Problem with Voting for Hillary Clinton." Also with us, Michael Eric Dyson, a Georgetown University professor, author of many books, including The Black Presidency, Barack Obama and the Politics of Race in America. Last November, he wrote a cover article for The New Republic titled, "Yes, She Can: Why Hillary Clinton Will Do More for Black People Than Obama." Professors Michael Eric Dyson and Glaude, thanks so much for joining us. Well, let's start with you, Professor Dyson, on this issue of why Hillary Clinton, you say, will do more for African Americans than President Obama.
Well, I was making that argument in the context of a host of things, not the least of which is that President Obama, for a variety of reasons, has been hamstrung, has been disinclined to deal with race, has been hesitant in procrastinating about engaging race. And I think that Hillary Clinton, for many of those reasons, will be more forthcoming. She's spoken, I think, very intelligently about implicit bias. She has asked white people to hold themselves accountable vis-a-vis white privilege. She's been talking about systemic racism as well as individual acts of bigotry and violence. So I think in the aggregate, when we look at the degree to which she is capable, because of that very white privilege, to speak about race in a way that Obama, even if he chose to be more forthcoming, would be categorized and put in a black box in a certain way, that she has both the drive, the intelligence, the ability, and the privilege to speak about it in a way that he is perhaps not only disinclined to do so, but maybe restricted in his own mind.
Professor Glaude.
Well, I understand the claim around the limits or the constraints Obama faced. But I think the claims around Hillary Clinton are basically aspirational, because there's no real evidence in her immediate past of any kind of genuine and deep concern about the material conditions of black life. And so, in other words, what I'm suggesting is that part of what the problem is that we can't infer from anything that she's done that when she gets in office that she's going to change and address the circumstances of black folk in any substantive way, or the most vulnerable in any substantive way. Because at the end of the day, I think Hillary Clinton is a corporate Democrat, that she is committed to a neoliberal economic philosophy.
What is neoliberal philosophy?
Well, a neoliberal economic philosophy involves a kind of understanding that the notion of the public good is kind of undermined by a basic market logic that turns us all into entrepreneurs, where competition and rivalry define who we are, where the state's principal function, right, is to secure the efficient functioning of the economy and the defense, and creating the market conditions whereby you and I can pursue our own self-interest. And part of what that does, if we only read it as an economic philosophy and not understand it as a kind of political rationality, producing particular kinds of subjects who are selfish, who are self-interested, who are always in competition with one another, then we lose sight of how neoliberalism attacks the political imagination. So the interesting question that I ask of Hillary Clinton is that, will she fundamentally change the circumstances that are at the heart of the problem facing this country? In fact, I think she's illustrative of the problem confronting the country.
Well, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, obviously, I agree with your analysis of neoliberalism, but in terms of dissecting the constitutive elements that make up what neoliberal vision is, we'd have to, given what you were talking about in terms of self-interest and competition, we'd have to say Bernie Sanders exhibits in a profound way some of the same elements, if that becomes the litmus test.
We're all in it, though.
Right? So if we're all in it, that means then the distinction makes no difference, because ultimately, if you're talking about affecting the material conditions of black people, I think that not only did she vote 93% of the same way that Bernie Sanders voted, say as one, if you will, lodestar for what a progressive politics might look like. It's not simply about inference. It's about the fact that she spent her time working with Marian Wright Edelman. It's about the way in which, as a first lady, she championed causes that black people could not only be concerned about but were involved with. It's not only the fact that as a senator and then as a Secretary of State, her awareness of what ethnicity and race and, of course, gender, those differences might make, at least provide the platform for her to articulate that vision. And more especially in the aftermath of racial crisis in America, she has responded in a way to mobilize the public understanding of those interests. So for me, if material interests are the predicate for us determining the legitimacy or efficacy of a particular policy, yeah, it's aspirational, but I want that aspiration to be about taking black life seriously. I want that aspiration to be about what we can do to transform the fundamental condition of our people. And I know, given the fact that Cory Booker has a prominent blurb on your book, that's supporting you, right? I know you disagree, but I'm saying you disagree with him, but you're still in league with him in terms of your analysis of what happens, even though, and I'm a fan of Cory Booker, but the devastating analysis of the consequences of neoliberalism in Newark. So I'm saying, so all of us are going to be associated with people who are not perfect, but we got to figure out a way to transform the context.
Let's be very clear. No, nobody's trying to occupy. Nobody's trying to occupy a pure, pristine space. We all have dirty hands.
Right.
But let's be honest, right? In terms of, people have been talking about her work with Marian Wright Edelman. You know, we know about Brother Peter left the Clinton White House for a reason, right? What did he leave it for?
Her husband.
Because not only her, no, see, this is what we want to attribute Chip to her, right? When we know Senator Edward Kennedy was leading that charge. She had to convince the White House in order to support Chip, right? But we know what welfare reform did. What did it do? It moved all these folk off the rolls.
I'm with you.
Right, as poverty increased, and it increased extreme deep
But
poverty,
I agree.
But I know you do. So so part of that we need to understand, right? How do we talk about her response to those babies, those children, right, who are leaving the violence, who were fleeing the violence of Honduras and Central America? We got to send them back.
Right.
Right? How do we respond to an economic philosophy, right, that holds Wall Street in high regard and Main Street in particular sorts of ways, right? As secondary in certain sorts of ways. So part of what I'm suggesting here, right, is not that I'm trying to defend Bernie Sanders.
Right.
As you say, that's just one bloom
of
the blossom of democratic awakening taking place in this country. What I'm saying is we need to understand who Hillary Clinton is, just as we need to understand who Barack Obama is. And what I take it to be is that part of what these folks are they're representatives of the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. These folk it's been on their watch. The crime bill, the welfare bill, the dismantling Glass-Steagall. This has been on their watch.
You ain't no doubt about that. But here's the bottom line, and here's the context. As they say in basketball, you got to deal with what the defense gives you. We are talking about Donald Trump. We're talking about Hillary Clinton in the context. Let's bring it back to reality. We're talking about within the context. We've been in a serious reality that is abstract and considering the philosophical consequences of particular ideologies. What I'm saying, in light of the real life circumstances we face now, we're talking about the choice between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, and of course Jill Stein and the Libertarian candidate. But I'm talking about those who got a real chance to win. And when we're talking about those who got a real chance to win, if we're concerned about the very people you're speaking about, you and I are going to be fine whether Donald Trump is president or whether Hillary Clinton is president in terms of our material conditions. But the people that we claim ostensibly to represent, those whose voices we want to amplify by our visions, by our own reflections upon the conditions they confront, ain't no doubt in my mind that Hillary Clinton represents the only possibility to at least address the undeniable lethargy of a political system, neoliberalism in particular, more broadly, the kind of epic sweep and tide of capital and its impact on the conditions of working class and poor black people. But I'm saying ain't nobody got a possibility of doing none of that in a context where Donald Trump is the president. It may mobilize and galvanize grassroots movements that will articulate their resistance against him. What it will not be able to do is leverage the political authority of the state in defense of those vulnerable bodies. It's not been perfect, but it certainly represents a huge advantage over a possibility of a Donald Trump presidency.
So let me make this point really quickly, right? So it is the case that we have to keep Donald Trump out of the White House. But it's also the case that under current conditions, 38%, close to 40% of children in the United States are growing up in poverty. In my home state of Mississippi, 50% of black children are living in poverty, right? It is the case under these current conditions with Barack Obama in office. It is the case that Freddie Gray's mother is still grieving, right? Rakia Boyd's mom is still grieving,
I'm with you.
right? We can call the roll.
I'm with you.
Call the roll. So part of what we're saying is that one of the things we have to do two things simultaneously. One is keep Donald Trump out of office, and two, right, announce that business as usual is unacceptable.
Yeah, but
so what does that mean?
If you're competing?
So no, of course, if it's going to mean that if
it's a priority.
No, if it's going to mean, hold on, let me make the claim. It's going to mean that the fear of electing Donald Trump cannot be the principal motivation of how we engage politically.
Absolutely, now it must be the principal motive.
No, that's a very limited conception of what democratic life is.
Because your ideals will be subverted, undermined, marginalized, and totally put to the periphery if Donald Trump.
Of the demos,
no, I'm saying it ain't the demos, it's the demon I'm talking about. And the demon right now in my mind is Donald Trump. I'm saying if we don't make that the priority of preventing the flourishing of an ethic, of a politic, and of a conception of the state, much less the global theaters within which America operates, if we don't prevent Donald Trump from ascending, so to speak, to that throne, all the legitimate stuff that you and I agree on, any analysis you make, if you read my book on President Obama, I lay all that stuff out there. I lay out the way in which black lives have been decentered in terms of their economic and social stability. And furthermore, when you talk about the degree to which black life matters, if that is, do you think in a Donald Trump presidency, not only can we not acknowledge that black lives matter, we can't even see if black lives can exist on a particular kind of plane that represents anything like democracy. So I'm saying that's the priority. And if that is addressed, I don't want to reduce all of the complicated political energy in America to electoral politics. But electoral politics is a crucial wedge that can be inserted into the contemporary political scene to at least be able to make a change.
So we've already agreed on a basic claim. Right. The basic claim is that we need to keep Donald Trump out of office.
No doubt. As a priority.
As a priority, right? And as an additional priority, not a secondary priority, we need to announce that business as usual is unacceptable.
I'm down with that.
But you seem to be supporting business as usual because Hillary Clinton, no matter how they try to rebrand her over these next few days, over this last few days, right? No matter how they try to brand her as a change maker, she is the poster child, right, of the corporate takeover of the Democratic Party. She's the poster child of blue dog Democrats, I would even say, of a certain kind of conservative tendency in the Democrat. So what does it mean?
I would disagree with that. But
well, I mean, of course, we can debate that. I might have overstated the case there. But what does it mean for us to be committed to a radical conception of democracy?
I'm down with the radical conception of democracy.
I don't. But you seem to be putting forward a kind of Niebuhrian realism here.
No, what I'm putting forth is an existential anxiety in the face of creeping demagoguery that renders our philosophical differences abstract. Because in the real world that you claim to be concerned about, what we are concerned about is how black people and poor people and people of color and people across the board who are vulnerable get represented in a politics of representation in our democracy.
What I'm concerned about, Mike, is what you know as well as I do, is that political scientists have said that black folk are a captured electorate. That is to say, the Republican Party doesn't have to care about what we do, and the Democratic Party every 6 years come into our communities and try to herd us to the polls like we're cattle chewing cud.
I'm with you on that.
And then they have no obligation to deliver on policy. But so she shows up in, hold up, she shows up in a church. They come to churches. They come into our communities. And when we talk about policy, how are you addressing the legacy of
But I'm with you on that.
So if you're with me on that, How is it then that a Democratic candidate can come into our community, come into this moment where all of this suffering, where you and I have laid it out in both of our books, all this suffering is engulfing our communities. When we look at the back of Barack Obama's head, what's going to be behind it are the ruins of black communities, the ruins of the most vulnerable in this country. And then we get business as usual, rebranded. And only because we are afraid of Donald Trump and not understanding our power as the demon.
But
it's
let
both
President Obama weigh in on this. On Wednesday night, he said no one is more qualified than Hillary Clinton to serve as president.
Even in the midst of crisis, she listens to people and she keeps her cool and she treats everybody with respect. And no matter how daunting the odds, no matter how much people try to knock her down, she never, ever quits. That is the Hillary I know. That's the Hillary I've come to admire. And that's why I can say with confidence, there has never been a man or a woman, not me, not Bill, nobody, more qualified than Hillary Clinton to serve as President of the United States of America.
That's President Obama on Wednesday night addressing, 18,000 people who packed in to the Wells Fargo Convention Center. Professor Dyson.
Well, first of all, the importance of that statement was to mitigate the vicious, lethal legacy of sexism that has become so normalized that we don't even pay attention to it. But let me get back to the point we were making before the break of Obama's rhetoric. The point is that why is it that we reduce the complicated legacy of our freedom struggle to present moments? Howard Thurman, the great prophetic mystic, said, refuse the temptation to reduce the level, to reduce your dreams to the level of the event, which is your immediate experience. And what I'm arguing for, Brother Eddie, is that we pull upon the very romantic, in the best sense of that word, conceptions of self-determination and the flourishing of black agency, all those technical terms. In other words, for black people to get stuff done under impossible circumstances. The reason I can maintain the hopefulness, and Niebuhr, since you brought him up, talked about the difference between optimism and hope. Optimism is a shallow virtue. Hope is a deep virtue, even in the face of impossibility. I happen to believe in a religious and spiritual reality that has been manifest politically that has motivated black people from the get-go. And what that says is, I don't care what you put before me. I don't care what's going on. I'm not going to give in to what's happening. If you talk about it's tough now, Martin Luther King Jr., Ralph Abernathy, Ella Baker were operating under conditions where black people didn't even have the franchise. Right. If black people were able to leverage their political authority and especially their moral, compelling arguments, their narratives and their stories in defense of their vulnerable bodies, who are we now with enormous access to the vote to lament the impossibility of the situation, as if this choice between maintaining a conception of the flourishing of black people under impossible circumstances versus putting Donald Trump in office, let's do both. Let's both acknowledge that Donald Trump is the most immediate priority to be prevented. And then at the same time, as you say, speak about these other interests, but it doesn't mean it has to be either or. Why can't we do both? Why can't we put Hillary Clinton in office the way you have conversation with Cory Booker, the way you have engagements in an elite white institution? You ain't teaching at Howard and neither am I. Right. All of our hands are dirty, right? But I mean, you ain't, I'm saying, I get you. I ain't mad at that. My son graduated from there. Mark Hill, what's up? Professor there. But my point is that it's not an either or situation. And I think that what you say I agree with, but what I don't agree with is deferring the legitimacy of the priority of Donald Trump being stopped from occupying space that will bring, if it's bad now, it's going to be, it's a Bobby Womack ethic. If you think you're lonely now, wait until the night, until Donald Trump becomes president.
Eddie Glaude, who do you want to see as president?
With these two choices?
In this election.
That's our sole choice.
I have no interest.
You don't think it matters whether...
I don't want Donald Trump to be in office. I can only put it in the negative.
Well, that's good enough.
Yes.
That's
I'm
good.
only going to put it.
And if you don't want Donald Trump to be in office, how would you prevent that from happening?
So part of what I've been arguing, and I wrote this piece with Fred Harris, a political scientist at Columbia, that we should vote strategically. And that is to say, if you're an African American or if you're a person of color or you're progressive of conscience where the word actually means something, right, in a swing state, it makes all the sense in the world to me, in a battleground state, that you vote for Hillary Clinton, because one of the objectives is to keep Donald Trump out of office. But if you're in a red state, like my mom and daddy in Mississippi, right, they're Democrats, but we know Mississippi's going Trump. Right, what do? You can actually blank out. You can leave the presidential ballot blank. You can vote for a third-party interest, right? Because what will happen in that moment, you will actually, 2020, be given the turnout, how many people vote for the Democratic candidate will actually impact the number of delegates that come from that state to the convention in 2020. I'm in a blue state. Right. I'm talking straight, because part of what we have to do is shift the center of gravity of how African Americans engage the political process. Because this is what 1924, James Weldon Johnson says. It's almost as if the Negro vote, quote, has already been prepackaged and sealed to be delivered before they vote. In 1956, Why I Won't Vote, W.E.B. Du Bois writes this piece and says, I reject the lesser of two evils.
We got
in 1965, Malcolm X said we should treat the ballot like a bullet, and until we get our target set, keep our ballot in our pockets, right? So part of what I'm saying, hold up, Mike. You invoked the grandness of the tradition. I'm giving you examples.
But we ain't got
what does it mean to think strategically about the vote, and what does it mean to actually embrace a radical democratic vision? If you are a centrist liberal, own that.
Right. Here's my point.
If you're not, then embrace a different kind of.
But I'm saying you're not a centrist liberal, but you got a centrist liberal on your book. You engage. Well, let me finish. But what I'm saying to you, making my point even more. But what I'm saying to you,
claim a pure space,
no. But if you ain't claiming a pure space, don't claim a space that sounds to most black people out there listening. This is the problem with these Negro intellectuals. You talking about an abstract articulation. Let me finish of grand principles and possibilities. When the woman asks you, or in our tradition, asks you who you gonna vote for, you stumbling and stammering. Well, hold on. What I'm saying, you had a pregnant pause. It delivered and birthed in us. What I'm saying to you, and that is not neutral, as you know better than anybody else. That's not a neutral thing. And I wish that black people were political scientists who could adjudicate competing claims about rationality on the one hand and demagoguery on the other. I'm telling you, at the end of the day, the black people you're concerned about, the vulnerable people you're concerned about, can't make distinctions. If you're in a blue state or in a red state, they can't color book like that. What they have to understand is the junta that is in the offing with Donald Trump coming into office has to be resisted. Go out and vote for Hillary Clinton, because a vote for Hillary Clinton preserves the possibility that the very dialogue that Professor Glaude and I are having, the very possibility of evoking a grand tradition of Du Bois and Malcolm X and James Weldon Johnson. However, none of them got you to vote. Martin Luther King Jr., Thurgood Marshall, Ella Baker, those are the linchpins in the narrative of black resistance to white supremacy, social injustice, and economic inequality that have delivered. I agree that we should study this in class, but on your ass, you should go out and vote for Hillary Clinton, who makes a tremendous difference.
Now, this is the thing. You have to have a fundamental faith in everyday, ordinary people. What you're representing as abstract is actually condescending to them. I can imagine BYP, I can imagine Black Youth Project 100 organizing in Chicago around this particular issue. This is what you need to do. Don't worry about who's going to be elected, selected by the Democratic primary. We're going to get this DA out of office.
Let's do both.
Let's do dream defenders. No, you're trying to say what you tried to suggest is that everyday ordinary people can't distinguish between blue and red. What we're talking about is organizing.
I didn't say that. I said they can't distinguish the kind of abstract political principles you're talking about.
I wasn't talking about abstract
principles. In terms of if you're a red state and a blue state, I'm saying the BYP.
I'm saying organizing.
But wait a minute. But it's not either or. It's not either or.
But see, this is the thing.
But it's not either or.
If it's the case.
It's not either or,
If it's the case, Mike.
Is it either or?
Let me ask you this question.
No, I'm asking you, is it either or?
The strategic plan that I'm suggesting suggests that it isn't either or.
Okay, that's all we're saying. We agree.
But see, the thing is that you're out here stumping for Clinton.
I'm out here stumping for a tradition of black liberation that happens.
Do not link our tradition to this nonsense.
It's not that I have to abstractly link it to it. I am the embodiment of that. When I'm out there on the streets preaching, I don't know about you, but I'm preaching in churches every Sunday. I'm out there helping. I didn't ask you that. I'm telling you what I'm doing. I'm telling you I'm in churches with black people preaching every Sunday. I'm talking about the way in which we leverage the political, moral, and spiritual authority of ordinary black people who, when you and I walk out this place, ordinary black people are going to look at me and see me as the embodiment of their dreams. I'm sure it happens to you as well. They stop me and tell me thank you. They congratulate me for at least having the authority, the courage. I don't take that seriously, but what I take more seriously is their identification with me as a voice piece for their aspirations and hopes. And all I'm saying to you, sir, is that I agree with you in the full sweep of your analysis. I'm saying the everyday, ordinary black folk I know, that I'm in contact with, that I'm with at political organizations, and I'm on the front line. When I spoke yesterday for the Black Caucus of the Democratic National Convention, when those 2,000 people said, what you say represents that, all I'm saying to you, Eddie, is that at the end of the day, we cannot afford the luxury of engaging in abstract reflections on the conditions of black people when what's at stake is a demagogue that you and I both resist, that you and I both think is problematic, getting into office. Once that happens, then we begin to leverage BYP. We begin to also articulate a countervailing narrative that says it ain't either or, it's both and. I believe in the spirit of our people to overcome and prevail against the odds.
We're going to break and then come back to this discussion. We are joined by Princeton professor Eddie Glaude. His article in Time magazine, My Democratic Problem with Voting for Hillary Clinton, and Professor Michael Eric Dyson, who you were just listening to, Georgetown professor and author of The Black Presidency, Barack Obama and the Politics of Race in America. He just wrote a piece in the New Republic, headline, Yes, She Can, Why Hillary Clinton Will Do More for Black People Than Obama. This is Democracy